humans. We have an interest in distinguishing, categorizing, separating, and we do it within our own races. So, of course, it will be at its maximum with a group of people differing so dramatically in appearance from their own. Just call the spade, and also let's get specific. The people, those of European descent, whites, who colonized America, match the savagery of the indigenous people with their own, and then some. The slaves, those of African descent, blacks, were, and let's be very honest here, terrorized, dehumanized, raped, murdered, divided, and conquered. The typical response from an unpersuaded white American tends to be number one, blacks had slaves. Number two, blacks' experience as slaves wasn't actually that bad. In response to one, to say blacks had slaves, to say nothing of the specific nature of the slavery. Further, to say blacks had slaves is to also say nothing at all of the reality of their American enslavement. I've thought a lot about the psychology behind this deflection. My best assumption is that it is an attempt to remove the possible feeling that something evil, intrinsically so, lies beneath at the heart of whites. It is an effort to remind, hey, whites ain't the only one. Also, white guilt undoubtedly is a real thing. And there is a fear by naysayers of racism that white guilt is this shameful, nonsensical thing. I don't know about that. When it comes to feelings such as guilt, it is the dosage that matters, its intensity, its frequency. I personally believe guilt can be as sensible as anything else as long as there is a clear understanding as to why it's being felt. For example, there have been many times where, upon watching the life of those in third world countries, I felt something you could call American guilt. What is this guilt composed of? It's an acknowledgement that I hadn't fully appreciated my circumstances until seeing large swaths of people with little to nothing. It's an understanding that my privileges, my resources, my everything has come by way of having the good fortune of being born where I did, when I did, and with who I did. It must be something in the periphery such as this because, as noted, it doesn't at all address the specificity of American slavery. In response to two, to say that the black experience of slavery was an overall decent experience is factually untrue. By what metric am I basing a people's experience, the subjective thing that it is it factually a thing? I'm using the metric of violence. Other than organized violence, sports, MMA, fictional violence, games, movies, humans don't tend to be well adjusted to sporadic, unfair, misappropriated violence, essentially tyrannical violence. Tyranny is something that the classic right-leaning American mind finds abhorrent. Were they enslaved, no matter how decent the lifestyle, again, it wasn't at all decent, but I'm granting this for argument's sake, it would be among one of the greatest injustices known to man. However, for blacks, it wasn't that bad for them. My assumptions here are somewhat layered. A, the bitterness and hatred towards blacks run so deep that rationality isn't welcome. B, human beings, whatever the race, whatever the gender, find it very difficult to admit a wrong. This difficulty is further amplified when a us versus them situation is occurring, and there is no greater us versus them as race until aliens happen to attack. See, when hatred feels righteous, it is one of the most difficult things in the world to let go of. So to acknowledge the profound dehumanization of blacks would be then to let go of something which feels so right and so accurate. On top of this, a mind that feels this way often lives among other minds that agree. Or even if not, the virtual world allows us to find each other, those who would see it our way, and thus the reinforcement and validation continues. To change is hard. To admit your perspective is tainted and you have harbored nonsensible, prejudiced feelings is very, very hard. Whiteness has long been the norm. They have been the victors. They have been the majority. They have had the power. A retort to this from some white fellow might be, I haven't benefited from this power, these norms. There are two men who feel this way when it comes to men versus women. They believe they haven't benefited in their advantaged life position as a male, and therefore the issues of women's rights are not at all so profound. I believe my point will be best understood by quickly recalling a conversational exchange I had with a young man years ago. He remarked very genuinely that he didn't see the point of there being a Women's History Month. I will fully admit I was barely aware such a month existed at the time, but I also remember finding it interesting that it followed Black History Month. My mind had computed it all, and I remember being confused myself. Not for the same reason as him, however. It seemed very evident to me why there was one, even if I didn't have an enthusiasm towards its existence. Women historically in virtually every culture have been dehumanized, terrorized, etc. themselves. As such, wouldn't it be sensible for a month to be dedicated to all the women who have been significant contributors but have been pushed out of any worthy spotlight for knowledge absorption so that they might too be popular historical figures? I am not a feminist. Most of my 20s was spent as a man whore. There have been women who have hurt me. I have observed women who were ugly inside. Yes, yes, yes. Even if I had nothing but bad experiences with women, historically, factually, they were at the bottom of any dynamic of power. They have been merely the soil for men to plant their seed. How could this be denied? Why would this be denied? For me to deny their history would be for me to be in denial. Denial is very at heart here. It's rampant in all humans. I must emphasize this. The typical naysayer to historical black mistreatment is, quite simply but quite complexly, in denial. F. The psychological hand me down of racist sentiments is as powerful as religion. You tend to believe whatever you believe as a result of being born in a specific environment. I've imagined myself as a blonde haired white child growing up in a racist family. I've imagined my father casually throwing out racially charged slanders and subtly to overtly helping me come to the realization blacks are inferior, whites are superior. Yes, I've imagined this. I've imagined they'd be loved despite the racism. Therefore, how could I possibly reject this belief system now, when those I love hold it, when it's been so deeply and elaborately woven into my culture? How, when, especially, more than anything, human beings of whatever race and gender are fools. It's almost hopeless. But history keeps going. Let's be real about it. Let's be honest about our current world. What the hell are we doing otherwise?